I'd like to talk a little bit about some things we've learned about lean over the last 25 years or so. But before I do, let me make a few comments. The first comment I want to make is that the slides I'm using here are available to you, and you're free to use them. They're just copyrighted under a Creative Commons copyright, and I think the conference organizers will provide the slides in PowerPoint format so you can change them or whatever. But please feel free to use the slides if you'd like. So I want to briefly comment about trying to learn new things, trying to adopt new ways, and I'm just going to read it off this slide. Hoping to create different behavior by explaining or trying to convince people doesn't really work. It may be correct explanation, but it doesn't really change our thinking, it doesn't really change our behavior. We don't behave a certain way because we lack information. We behave one way or another because it's a habit. It's a habit in our brain, right? What can work is deliberately practicing a different routine, which over time begins to change how you think. Now, when you do that, at the beginning you start with basic small routines. You wouldn't try to run 20 miles or 20 kilometers on your first workout. So you begin with small routines that I like to call starter kata or starter practice routines that help you learn some fundamentals and build some initial confidence in whatever it is you're trying to learn. The learner has to develop a little confidence. And that's what kata are. So I just want to say right off the bat, that's all that kata are. They are practice routines that help us make it easier to adopt new ways of thinking and acting. That's really all they are. Okay? So here's what we're doing, really. Just to summarize, I'll make the conclusion at the beginning. We're taking a scientific thinking pattern, and there are several of them out there. We call that pattern the improvement kata, but again, you can call it something else. We're taking a scientific thinking pattern, and we're combining it with routines of deliberate practice. Scientific thinking is not new. Deliberate practice is not new, but bringing those two together is somewhat unique. And that's what we're all about with the improvement kata and the coaching kata, so that we try to make scientific thinking a skill that can be practiced and learned by anyone. Okay, now I'll begin the actual presentation. So Sylvain, you already presented this slide, I believe, with the two research questions. The Toyota Kata research took place from 2004 to 2009, and it basically addressed two questions. What are the unseen managerial routines and thinking that lie behind Toyota's success with continuous improvement and adaptation? We knew Toyota was doing something different. We knew it was in their management system, but that's invisible. So we had to kind of figure out what is it they're doing that's different, that makes them so continuously improving, like the comment at the beginning, which was said we need to go from projects to kind of daily or sustained improvement. The second question is actually maybe the more interesting question. How can other organizations develop similar routines and thinking in their organization, in their companies? That's a difficult question. Question number two is where I'm spending all my time now. But let's begin by looking at question number one. What are the unseen routines at Toyota? And if you study Toyota's management system long enough, a kind of a pattern starts to emerge. And I'm a little bit slow. And I learned that the most intelligent people are not the best researchers because they think they know the answer right away. What you need is someone like me who's a little bit slow, who has to look again, and study some more. And eventually, because of our persistence, you start to see patterns. And sure enough, if you look at Toyota long enough, you'll see a common pattern emerge. It's different from person to person, it's different from facility to facility, but overall the basic pattern is the same, and it looks something like this. And you've already seen this morning, so I won't dwell on it. There's an overall direction or challenge, something big they're going for. Number two, then they try very hard to understand where are we right now in this particular area, our team or our process. Then they define where do we want to be next? Where do we want to be in 2 weeks? Where do we want to be in 3 months? Something like that. And then, as you already know, the fourth step of the improvement kata pattern, they conduct experiments or PDCA cycles toward that next target condition. This is just a model. When you do research, you observe a phenomenon and you create a model to represent what you're observing. And that's all that is. And George Box, a famous statistician, said, all models are wrong. That includes this one. because they don't actually, it's not reality. The map is not the territory. This model is not the reality. It is a depiction of reality. All models are wrong, some are useful. And there are many other models that are very similar to this. It's kind of interesting. If you look at systems thinking, critical thinking, learning organization, design thinking, creative thinking, solution-focused practice, preferred futuring, skills of inquiry, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they all use a similar kind of pattern. It's a human, scientific, or human entrepreneurial pattern. And that's kind of cool to find out that what Toyota is doing is really something that is out there, has been out there for a while. Finding commonality between Toyota's management approach and models of human creative endeavor makes perfect sense. So what Toyota's managers are doing in their daily work is having people practice a universal skill for improving, adapting, and innovating along those dark paths, those uncharted paths that Sylvain talked about. Toyota's management approach involves teaching everyone in the organization a scientific way of thinking, which can be applied to an infinite number of situations, an infinite number of goals. So basically, they're teaching a deliberate, effective, shared way of working in their organization and trying to make that an automatic habit in everyone in the organization. So that's kind of the Toyota Kata research. Let's talk a little bit about scientific thinking. So improvement based on eliminating waste, as Sylvain has pointed out, is just too unscientific. This diagram, by the way, and there are many like them on the internet, it's kind of funny. If you see what it says eliminate waste, identify waste, develop countermeasures, check it, verify, what does it say here? Measure the results, establish the new standards, celebrate the success. There's the pizza party. Do it again, and we go around and around. It's a very common conception about continuous improvement or lean, but it's wrong. It's not what Toyota's doing. And you can see in the picture it's kind of random. At Toyota, eliminating waste is more of an outcome of something they're working on. So they talk about eliminating waste, but really they're shooting for a particular goal. They work very hard, they experiment to reach that goal, and then when they look back, they say, look at all the waste we eliminated. But they didn't at the beginning say, let's eliminate waste. They said, we need to get to this goal, which is maybe more efficient. So we've taken kind of an outcome of their process and made it our process, right? And it's a bit of an error, I think. So if you ask 5 people what to improve, you'll get at least 5 different answers, each according to their particular perspective, beliefs, and bias. And there's just too much time in the day. We have to serve patients. We have all these things that we can improve, and this person thinks we should do these, and this person thinks we should do these, but there's so little time in the day, we really need to focus on what's important for getting to the next objective that we have. Otherwise, we waste the limited capability, the limited capacity we have for making improvements. Okay, so you need a target condition, or one needs a target condition. That's a terminology I like to use. So in other words, you can now distinguish between the things we have to do to get to our goal, and you can't see all of them yet when you start out, of course, and there are things you can do, but you don't really need to do. And it was actually a high-level Toyota person who said to me early on, he said, you Americans are always talking about what can we improve? And he said, inside Toyota, we don't ask that question. We don't ask, what can we improve? We ask the question, what do we need to improve? And to be able to answer that question, you first have to have a target condition. You first have to have a goal. Now, having a target condition takes a little bit of analysis and planning. And you can see in the upper left-hand corner here, so to be able to establish this next target condition, you need to understand what's the overall direction or goal. Where are we trying to go, right? And then you have to understand where you are to be able to set the next target condition. You can't set goals randomly. You first have to understand where you are. A goal has to be meaningful to the people who are working there and appropriate for where you're working on. All right, so we understand the direction. We've grasped the current condition. We've established a target condition. We're ready to improve in a systematic, focused way instead of randomly. So now we can get going, right? We know the direction. We know where we are. We have our target condition. It's time to make a plan. Well, not quite, unfortunately. Let's try a little experiment. to see why just making an action plan won't work. Can I give you this die? So I'm going to ask Sylvain to roll the dice. It's one die. We're going to roll it 3 times, and we're going to add up the numbers. But before we do that, and so the sum will be a number between 3 and 18, right? But before we do that, I'd like you to take a piece of paper somewhere in front of you and write down the answer to this question. What will be the sum of the 3 rolls? We'll roll the dice 3 times. It's going to be a number between 3 and 18. Please answer the question on a sheet of paper. What will be the sum of the 3 rolls? And I'll give you 20 minutes to... Okay, let's give it a shot. Go ahead and roll the dice. So we got a 3. He's saying another 3. We better not get another 3. Huh? And a 5. All right. So we got a total of 11. How many had 11? Oh, wow, so few. Sylvain, I thought you'd choose the audience very carefully. Wow, okay, okay. So, those of you who wrote down the wrong number, who didn't write down, those of you who wrote down the wrong number, how do you feel? Go ahead, how do you feel? Philip feels bad. He rolled the dice wrong. You chose the right number? Okay, so maybe it's a little bit like not so bad. It's a game of chance. Who can know? It's a roll of the dice. It's random, right? Okay, fair enough. One doesn't feel too bad about that. Let's try another one. Here's a number series, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Let's do the same thing on the same sheet of paper in front of you. Please write down your answer to this question. What will be the next number in this series? In this series, what will be the next number? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Okay. The next number is 2. It repeats after the 12. It goes around and... Hey! Wow. Remarkable. So, those of you who wrote down the wrong number, how do you feel this time? How do you feel? Tricked? Are there French words? I'm not going to try to say that. So maybe a little more like this, right? Okay. So what was different about the 2 scenarios? Why does one feel not so bad and the other one it's kind of like, hey, what's different? So there's an expectation, right? We think we know. It looks like it's going to be 14, like many other number series. Okay. So here's a proposal. It's just an idea, okay, about what may be different between these 2 scenarios. And I'd like to suggest that a big difference is how easy or hard it is to spot what we call the knowledge threshold. And the knowledge threshold is where we have no more facts and data and we can only guess. It's where the facts and data end, right? So in round 1 with the dice, it's very easy to see the knowledge threshold. We know, okay, that we're going to roll the dice 3 times, right? You can see that. But beyond that, we don't know anything. And we know we don't know because it's a roll of the dice. In round 2, the knowledge threshold was much more difficult to see. And we thought we know the answer, so we go through the knowledge threshold. Yet in both rounds, the knowledge threshold is basically about the same. There are no facts and data beyond the initial setup. What would be a good answer in both rounds? Heck if I know, okay. What would be a good answer? Anyone? I don't know, right? Let's see. I love let's try it and see, right? That's a great answer. Let's try it and see. So inside Toyota, they don't want you to say you know if you don't know. They want you to say, I don't know. And when I first heard that, I thought, oh, life at Toyota is easy. You just say, I don't know. You know, my contribution today. And what they expect is you can say, I don't know, but then you have to explain how are you going to figure it out. You have to, in almost the same breath, say, okay, I don't know, and here's my experiment, right? Why don't we say, I don't know? Why don't we say, let's find out? Because we're experts. There are many theories about why humans do that. I have one, and I think it's because our brain fills in the blanks. Our brain fills in the blanks. Now, this is in English, so hopefully it'll work here. But please do me a favor, read out loud what you see. Right, okay, so everybody's probably seen this, but of course, it doesn't say that, right? So we don't notice the knowledge threshold because our brain automatically fills in the blanks. How many times have you seen something out of the corner of your eye and you thought, there's the cat or the dog or something, right? And if you turn to look, it's your jacket or something else, right? It's a very common thing, right? What I find interesting about that is your brain didn't say, there's something over there, I don't know what it is, please wait, or get more information. What did your brain do instead? Your brain said, the cat, or something like that. It happens every day, right? Notice, we can do this again. What does it say? You can't not see jumping to conclusions. Your brain automatically fills this in without you consciously making that step. Now, don't let me give you the wrong impression. We need this cognitive mechanism to survive. We would not be here today if we did not have the ability to make very quick judgments and react based on them. We would not be here. We would not have evolved this far. We probably wouldn't have survived the traffic this morning. It's a very important mechanism for humans, but it causes some problems. And here's the point. There's always a knowledge threshold. There is always a knowledge threshold. And some key points about it are they're very difficult to see unless you practice seeing a knowledge threshold. Now, I'd like to warn you, it's still time to save yourself. But it's too late for me, it's too late for Sylvain, it's too late for Philip. When we sit in a meeting, and it's really fun to talk about things that may be and ignore a knowledge threshold, but we've gotten to the point where you sit in the meeting and you go, guys, we don't know. There's no reason for us to be discussing this. We need to discuss our next experiment. It makes you very unpopular in meetings. It's much more fun to sit around, drink coffee, and talk about things. And so they're hard to see. We see further by experimenting, and we never know in advance what the result of an experiment is going to be. So here's a knowledge threshold. See the road? What's on the other side? Well, we can get some croissant and coffee and have a nice discussion about what might be on the other side of the road. These are terrific meetings, right? Or we can stop and say, we will send Philip ahead to look what's over the road, right? The knowledge threshold is the learning edge. By the way, that's a phrase from social science. It's the learning edge. It's the place where the next experiment should take place. We all talk about PDCA in the lean community, but there's not a lot of skill yet in doing PDCA. One skill for PDCA is to know where should we experiment. And if you can see the knowledge threshold, there's the next experiment. It becomes very easy. So that leads us into the core dynamic of scientific thinking, which is sort of a coordination between what we think will happen and what really happens, between a theory and between evidence, and then adjusting based on what we learned. I think this diagram captures it very good. Scientific thinking is not all that complicated, and I think the diagram right there shows it. And we can use this procedure, this pattern, to find our way through the darkness. Thank you again, Sylvain, for that slide. Through the darkness to our target condition that we don't know in advance how we will reach. And that's nothing other than the scientific learning cycle. I won't go over that. You make a prediction, you take action, you try it. One thing, by the way, that people in the lean community are still struggling with, there's a difference between collecting the evidence and evaluating the evidence. Oftentimes people will do an experiment and immediately interpret it, but there's a step before that where you say, I'm just looking at the data at this point. So you strive to the target condition through iterative learning, these small, rapid experiments, and advance our knowledge quickly. They move us away from what doesn't work toward what does work. So that's kind of the pattern of scientific thinking. Great. So we now have a great model. It's like a lot of other models, the improvement Kata model in this case. Understand the direction. What's the big goal we're trying to reach? Where are we now? Establish the next target condition that's appropriate based on where we are now, and then do experiments between here and there. This scientific pattern suits complex dynamic situations of the type that we are faced with these days, where you can't predict the path in advance. And B, it makes empowerment possible. We had a lot of talk about empowerment in the late 20th century, and we told teams, you're a self-directed team, you're empowered, please go. But when you just let people be self-directed, it goes off in many different directions. So what you have to do is teach them a way of working so they can be empowered. Otherwise, you just have empty empowerment. So we're ready to go, right? But of course, there is another problem. And now I'd like to talk about the other side of the coin. We talked about scientific thinking. The other side of the coin is deliberate practice, or kata, for developing scientific thinking. Unfortunately, a model is not enough to change our behavior, not enough to change our thinking. I wish that it were. I think there are a lot of researchers in the world who create a model, something like this model up here, and say, there it is, I've explained it. Now please, go make it happen, right? And it would be neat if that worked, but it doesn't work. Just because you put a model out is not enough to create change. So scientific thinking, is it something we're born with, something that certain people are born with, or is it something that's learned? And it is by definition something that's learned because because of the bias, because we see the cat on the chair, but it's actually the jacket, because we make the quick judgments, we're terrible at scientific thinking as human beings in a natural state. We don't come equipped to do scientific thinking. It is, by definition, a learned skill. So let's go back to the two research questions. Remember question 2, how can other companies develop similar routines and thinking in their organizations? That's that second question I find much more interesting. And what's interesting here is we spend a lot of time copying Toyota, but actually Toyota has a different problem. Toyota has a different goal than we do. Toyota is trying to maintain a particular organizational culture as it grows rapidly in the world and has been growing in the last 15 years. We, on the other hand, are engaged in a process of trying to change our culture, trying to change behavior and thinking in the organization. Those are two very different objectives, two very different tasks. So at this point, I don't think we can really copy Toyota anymore because they're working on something else. So what does it take to change our thinking? Let's do another little experiment. Please get a piece of paper and a pen, or a pencil. What I'd like to do is, when I say go, sign your name 5 times with your normal hand. You already know what's happening here, but it makes a good point. So I want you to sign your name 5 times, your normal way, and when you're done signing the 5 times, please raise your hand. And I'll try to stop the stopwatch when about half of the room has accomplished it. Sign 5 times, raise your hand when you're done, ready, go. Some hands are coming up. Hands are coming up. Okay, maybe that's about half. All right, great, thank you. That's 18 seconds. Three seconds faster than the Americans. All right, you know what's going to happen now. So we're thinking about what does it take. Let's go back. What does it take to change the culture in the organization? We're trying to change the behavior and the thinking of the people in the organization. Let's instead do a small change. Just one small change. Please switch hands. Okay, same procedure. With your non-dominant hand, please sign your name 5 times when I say go, and raise your hand when you're done. Ready, go. Okay, hands are coming up. Some. Yeah. When I see about half, I'll. Okay, maybe that's half now. Okay, thank you. 38 seconds. 38 seconds compared to 18. Americans, they're still working. We're sending in a drone. Okay, how did it feel the second time compared to the first time? How did it feel? Awkward? Frustrating, I agree. Unnatural, awkward, those are such great words about your change process in your organization, right? Awkward, frustrating, unnatural, right? Exactly. So why does the second time feel odd? Now, by the way, now you have an engineer talking about the brain, so please enjoy it with caution, right? So we have to be more conscious about things we haven't done before. We have to be more deliberate, and it slows us way down. So we have this brain that weighs 3 pounds, I don't know, a kilogram, a little over a kilogram, this meatloaf. But it takes about 20% of your body's energy. So the brain is constantly trying to conserve energy. It will shift as much as it can to automatic responses. Imagine if you had to decide everything. When you start to drive a car, where do you practice? Parking lot. Why? It's easier. Well, you will survive, right? Because the brake, the clutch, the gas pedal, the gear shift, the checking with the head, all of this is new, right? And you have to consciously think about it. When you're doing that, what are you not paying attention to? The road, right? Today when you drive, do you think about where the brake pedal is and that kind of thing? Not at all. So you can spend your cognitive resources, or your brain's energy, on what else? On what? The road in front of you and navigating that territory, right? So the brain will make things automatic so that we can conserve energy. So the brain creates and prefers habits for safety and efficiency. Unconscious thinking enables us to get through the day by taking care of routine decisions and conserving brain energy. You only have so much cognitive resources. Unconscious thinking is very fast and instinctive. Oh, that's a cat. While deliberate thinking is slow and intentional because it costs a lot of our energy and attention. For those of you who are interested, you can see on the left, we have billions of these synapses in our brain, and here's a trained synapse. There's very little resistance. The signal flows very easily. On the right is an untrained synapse, something we haven't done before, and it has a very difficult time transferring the signal. We slow way down. We have to be deliberate. On the left is signing your name the way you always do. On the right is signing your name with the other hand. So we have a lean dilemma, okay? How did it feel the second time? Different, difficult, weird, uncomfortable, awkward. We have well-established neural pathways for signing with our dominant hand, automatic, fast, comfortable. And we default to the already established thought and behavior patterns because they conserve mental resources. You're going to sign with your normal hand. So here's the dilemma. We want to change to working scientifically according to something like the improvement kata pattern in our organization. That's what Toyota's been doing for 60 years. However, we naturally tend to stick with our current ways of doing things because they use existing neural pathways that require much less energy. So the message of my talk is that we are screwed. I'm sorry, and that's the end of the talk. Best of luck to you. You could end there. It's possible. So information and incentives are not enough to change behavior and thinking. It's very easy to go on the web and find many different lean courses. Here, creative problem solving workshop, 8D problem solving, lean and Kaizen course, on and on and on. The content of the courses is correct. The content of the courses is useful. And I'm not saying you shouldn't take the course, but that alone will not change our behavior. That will not change our behavior. That's just like taking a course and they say, well, you should write with your other hand. And then you go home. You're not going to do that. So let's take a look at how the brain actually acquires new patterns, how we acquire new habits. Yes, please play the video. Perfect timing.
Not so long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well-travelled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep travelling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
That's the best video I've found so far that explains in 2 minutes kind of how it kind of works. It's not quite that mechanical. I think if an engineer looks at that video, the brain is suddenly like a machine, right? It's not quite like that. We'll talk about that in a moment. But the video is available on YouTube, and maybe we'll send out the link for the video so that you can use it. There are a few other videos I'd like to share with you too. I'm not going to show them today, but we'll give you the links. So here are some ingredients for changing our minds. Here are some ingredients for developing new skills. And this is the second question, right? How can other companies develop similar patterns of thinking and acting in their organizations? And we're struggling, or working on, we're struggling with that question, and we're learning a lot. And so please view this as information from along the way. It's not, there are other ingredients too. But number one is just daily practice, right? And then number two, if you want to practice every day, you need to have something to practice, particularly for beginners. So that's what these kata are, these starter kata, these routines. And by the way, daily practice, it's better to do 15 minutes a day than to do 1 hour once a week. It's much more effective to do a little bit every day. You do need coaching. This is the third thing. Now, there's a lot of talk about coaching in the lean community right now. But it's not just general coaching or life coaching or that kind of thing. It's very specific. This is a kind of skill-building coaching that is specific to the skill you're trying to learn. A soccer coach is not going to be able to coach you in playing golf. So the coaching is a corrective feedback mechanism. And I think you showed the Karate Kid movie, right? So, for those of you who've seen the movie, he's polishing a certain way, and the coach has him, no, do it this way. Why is the coach correcting the learner? So they make a habit the right way, right? Because if you practice anything, it will become a habit, right? Pretty quickly, too. It's kind of dangerous. So the coach has to make a correct... I like this picture. You see how the coach is actually physically rearranging what the learner is doing so that they practice the right routine. Later, the learner may not need to have that corrective input because it has become a habit. And the fourth ingredient here, I'm calling mastery, or maybe just the feeling that I'm getting better. The emotions of the learner play a big role. And those of you who have partners may have noticed this. Someone can practice something over and over and over again, but if they don't really want to practice it, if they don't really want to learn it, then it doesn't matter. They can practice it 100 times. They won't acquire the habit, right? So the learner has to have a sense of, I'm getting better, I'm mastering this. Now, some learners will come into whatever it is you're trying to do to develop your culture. They'll come into that with, they want to do this. They're on board. Maybe you are good examples of that, right? But there are many other people in your organization who are probably more like this, right? And we had one company in Germany, Siemens, said, because of this effect that brain science is telling us that we must have a positive emotion about the practice, otherwise the practice won't work. We must first convince our people to be positive about the practice. And we said, if you find what can convince your people, please send it to us immediately. We have never found anything. Which means the learner has to develop this sense of positive emotion along the way. Again, those learners who come in and say right from the beginning, I want to learn this, they're on board, great. But I think the majority of our learners are probably going to be like, this is painful, wait and see, I've seen so many programs come and go, whatever it is, right? And it becomes a task for the coach. And it's pretty subtle. The coach has to ensure that the learner is stretched and nervous, but succeeds. It's the coach's responsibility to make sure that the learner succeeds, and not constantly succeeding. You don't make progress constantly, but periodically the learner has to have a sense for, hey, I think I'm getting better at this. And maybe I can mention from the side, it's not in the presentation, that's the human condition, right? I think I'm getting better. I think I can get better. And maybe that's what we're trying to do with the improvement kata model, which is like many other models, is simply to practice a systematic scientific way of working as groups of people to achieve difficult but interesting things. And how different is that from, let's go out and look for opportunities to eliminate waste? In fact, I don't know how you can keep a team motivated about eliminating waste for more than maybe 2 weeks. And it's very easy to keep a team motivated about things that are really difficult to achieve, but we are making a sense of progress and we're getting a sense of getting there. That's what we're talking about here. So, a couple of sobering lessons for the lean community. If we only periodically conduct training events and only episodically work on improvement, and the rest of the time it's business as usual, according to neuroscience, what you're teaching is business as usual. So if you look in the diagram here, if those are days of the week, and the red, this is where we make an improvement, and then this is just working as usual, the brain scientists would look at this and say, you are teaching this. You're teaching the business as usual. What this means is the coaches, it has to happen every day, a little bit every day. So the coaches have to be the middle managers. They can't be the lean department. How many in the lean department? Okay. Well, I don't want you to feel bad because the managers need a coach too. So there's still a job for the lean department, right? But we have to move this into the line functions in the organization if we actually want to develop and change the culture of the organization. Pretty interesting. Number two, coaching. We've talked about it now. Very important. Ironically, to learn how to coach, the managers first have to learn how to do. This is a big problem. We'll come back to that. So for coaching, there is a coaching kata, which is, again, a starter routine for coaches. I won't go over it here. We've talked about the learner has to have a sense of progress or sense of mastery. And then finally, kata. You practice kata at the beginning so their pattern becomes a habit. They're just for beginning. See this little device here for golf? I don't play golf, but it's a little thing you put on your wrist so that you hold your hands properly. You wouldn't use this forever. You only use it to create that fast neural pathway, like signing your hand. What would happen if you signed your name with your other hand every day for a month? What would happen? You get better at it. That's what a kata is right there. That's all it is. So instead of just having a model, the improvement kata has practice routines for each step of the improvement kata. And that's the key piece in terms of answering the question of how can other organizations develop these kinds of habits and patterns of thinking and acting in their organizations. You need to have some kind of practice routines with coaching and so forth and so on. So we have starter kata, or there are starter kata for each step of the improvement kata. Now, we don't expect people to use these forever, and sometimes we'll go into a company and we'll see the routines, the practice routines from Toyota Kata, and they're permanently put on the wall. But that's not really what they're for. They're just to get us started. so that these patterns become kind of habitual. Then the practice routine becomes less and less necessary. So it's like a rocket to get us started. I have a video here, but I didn't give it to you. I didn't realize we'd have quite this much time. So I'll send you the link to this video. It's two people at Merck, actually, doing a coaching cycle. When you watch this video, it's very stiff. It's an early coaching cycle, and it feels kind of stiff, and people watch the video, and they're a little bit uncomfortable about it, right? But what were the words you used to describe when you first started writing with your other hand? Awkward. What's that? Backward. Unnatural, right? So here we are, and think about it. You're going to try to change how you're thinking and acting by practicing a different way. And the first experience is going to be awkward, stiff, unnatural, right? Can you see the extent of the challenge that you face? Can you see the role of coaching? Can you see the role of constructive feedback or corrective feedback coming from the coach? Can you see the role of the learner periodically getting a sense that they're mastering the skill? You know, it's not the pizza party to celebrate, look at all the waste we've eliminated. It's the pizza party to celebrate, wow, getting more skillful, right? It's a different thing. We will send you the link to this video. So, the challenge of creating lean management. The goal of this presentation basically is to help make us aware of what is the task we face. And I think lean has had kind of an easy sell for the last 25 years. You go into the senior people and you say, hey, this is about eliminating waste, reducing cost, improving efficiency, improving quality. There's not a leader out there who's going to say, no, I don't want that. That's a pretty easy sell, okay? But we're learning more now. I wanted to talk to you about some things we're learning about lean. We're learning that it's a little bit more than that. It's kind of a behavior modification process, a conditioning process inside Toyota to learn some scientific skill. And when you say to the very same leaders, oh, well, lean is actually about learning how to think and act scientifically through a lot of deliberate practice every day on real things, not fake practice. And the managers are the teachers, which means we have to get all of our middle managers skillful in this routine first before they can teach someone else. Already the leader is probably checking the watch. You know, okay, I wanted to make better results for the next quarter, whatever. You've probably lost 75% of the people who said yes to efficiency. And I think that's okay. There are different ways to run a successful organization. But I think we should go into this with our eyes open and say, this is the challenge we faced. I'm here to tell you it's a marvelous challenge. It's highly enjoyable, highly diverting, and as you can probably imagine, the skill set that you're teaching at work, the scientific thinking and acting, spills over into daily life. In fact, and I don't tell this to a lot of people, I didn't want to write the Toyota Kata book. There was no intention to write the book. We were interested in how practical the improvement kata pattern is for everyday life. But as we thought about it, where do people learn their habits? And I think people learn quite a few of their habits at work. And so we wrote a book about work, practicing improvement kata at work. But frankly, my bigger interest is that we learn this pattern, learn to think and act this way, and that it does spill over from our workplace into how we teach our children, how we handle political situations. Maybe we would make a fence around Prince Edward Island, and all experiments are first tested there politically, right? PEI, people can't leave, we take the bridge back out. You know, it's one idea. So there is maybe a shift going on to something you might call 21st century lean. And so on the left-hand side, you see what we did in the 20th century with lean, the late 20th century, periodic improvements. That's really shifting to daily improvement and daily practice. 20th century, there was a big focus on lean staff, create the lean promotion department. 21st century, the focus is really on that middle manager. Those middle managers as the coaches and teachers in the organization. And lean from the last century was about eliminating waste, And I think Lean this century is more and more about what do you want to achieve? What do we need to achieve in our organization? What do we need to achieve in our team? Getting there, of course, is a challenge. If managers have to be learners before they can be teachers, wow. This is where we're different from Toyota. Toyota already has a lot of experienced coaches. We don't. Yes, we have no coaches. What do? You can apply the same improvement kata pattern to this organizational level challenge. That is, what's our goal at the organizational level? Where are we now? What's our next target condition? And then we can start experimenting in that direction. It is a universal pattern in that sense. Okay, the other thing I wanted to tell you about, I just wanted to mention kata in the classroom. It's more difficult for adults to learn new habits than it is for children to learn new habits. It's pretty obvious sometimes. So we're starting to take, the last year, kata into the classroom. These are middle school students in science classrooms, and they're doing a simple 1-hour exercise on the improvement kata pattern. We're actually trying to influence the teacher so that the teacher will use the pattern again and again. But instead of lecturing the teacher, we simply do an exercise in the classroom. The teacher does an exercise. We show them how to do it with the improvement kata pattern. If you're interested in it, by the way, there's a website. There's nothing for sale. Everything is for free. It's called katatogrow.com. And so that's an activity that's been going on. And one way to create scientists is to take adults and try to change the behavior, get them to write with their other hand. Another way to create scientists is to begin with young people. So, best wishes for your practice, and I mean that, it really is kind of a practice thing. Invite you to visit the Toyota Kata website. Sylvain, you put the book up there in my picture, that's very nice. But the book stays the same. The Toyota Kata book doesn't change. McGraw-Hill is happy to keep printing those. But we keep learning things, and so we put that on the Toyota Kata website. There's nothing for sale there, but as we learn things, we stick them up there.